pleasure I introduce my friend and senior class advisor, Mr. John York.
Ladies and gentlemen, we stand for the presentation of our nation's colors.
Your survey indicated that 79% of the class of 1993 will continue their education. 43% will enter a four-year college. 30% will enter a two-year college or technical school, and 6% will enter the armed forces or seek some form of additional training. Every year, I have the same interesting statistic. 2 students from the class said that they will marry within the next year, but they have not indicated to whom. 92 seniors chose to attend Polaris. 10 students from Polaris received awards of distinction. I would like to introduce Mrs. Judy Walsh, principal of Polaris. Judy, would you please stand? I think she deserves our applause. 38 members of the National Honor Society Society were from the class of 1993. 37 from Maria and 1 from Blaise. 38 seniors received an award for having a 3.5 scholastic average or higher. 27 seniors received this award for 4 years in a row. Berea High School also had 2 National Merit Commended students. This is certainly a most significant accomplishment for these 2 students. Overall, the class of 1993 has already received scholarships and grants in the amount of $643,950. I repeat, $643,950. Certainly, the entire staff of Berea High School is to be commended for their role in making this possible. We do have a long tradition of excellence. I would ask our staff to stand. They are the heart of Berea High School. Please stand. I would also like to thank the representatives for elementary, middle schools, and central office. Each year, local groups and educational organizations provide scholarships to our graduating class. I wish to express our deep appreciation to these groups and organizations. If you look in your program, you will see that scholarship and award recipients are listed and the Berea School District. Mrs. Harold, please come forward. Mrs. Harold, I present to you the Berea High School class of 1993. They have met all the requirements of the State Board of Education and the Berea Board of Education for graduation. Mrs. Harold.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of the members of the Board of Education, I want to congratulate the members of this graduating class. We want you to know, just as your family and friends are bursting with pride tonight, we too feel a sense of pride in your accomplishments. We feel confident that you will move on to your new life. You will represent the Berea High School in the most positive way. We wish you the very best of luck in the future. Our hearts go out to you. You may achieve and accomplish the things that are in your heart. Mr. Winkle, on behalf of the members of the Berea Board of Education, I am honored and proud to accept this graduating class of 1993.
Thank you, Mrs. Harold. I would also like to introduce the other members of the Board of Education, Mrs. Kathy Chapman, Mr. Mark Comstock, and Mrs. Rosie Fabrizi. If you all please stand. The awarding of diplomas takes time. By your very presence here tonight, each of you recognizes the importance of the graduation ceremony. The class of 1993 requests that the attention given to the first graduate to receive a diploma should be equally extended to the last graduate to receive a diploma. Applause would prevent the next graduate, family, and friends from hearing their name pronounced. Again, applause would prevent the next graduate, family, and friends from hearing their name announced. Please remain seated until the last graduate receives a diploma. Pictures will be taken electronically. We ask that you respect the area that's needed for the ceremony. After the last diploma has been awarded, the class will sing the alma mater, accompanied by the Berea High School Symphonic Band. Closing remarks and change with a tassel will end the ceremony. I would also like to recognize 2 people who meant much to the Berea High School family and who had untimely deaths. Mrs. Carol Robinson, a health and home economics teacher, died last year, as did Ethan Conrad, who would have graduated with the class of 1993. I would like to have a moment of silence for these two very missed family members. Mr. Wayne Thompson and Mr. John Yu will now serve as announcers for the presentation of the bowls.
Lisa Ann Rush. William Alvarado.
Maxime Jean Detert. Trish Rose Pitch. John Joseph Elam. Michelle Lynn Luba.
Gregory D. Elliott. Abby Dean Hammer. Russell Lee Ernie. Jennifer Lynn Hanna. Joshua P. Erskine. Karen Lynn Hawkins. Joseph A. Villa.
Timothy B. Fisher.
Leaders will now come forward leading the alma mater. Closing the alma mater, we have the closing remarks given by the president of the senior class. Please stand for the alma mater.
father always tells me, if you don't know where you're going, any road leads you there. On behalf of the class of 1993, I'd like to thank all the parents for their love and understanding these last 13 years, the teachers for all their generosity and patience, the administrators and counselors for their tolerance and guidance. You all have worked very hard on helping us get here tonight. And once again, thank you. Seniors, there are only 13 more things I'd like all of us to keep in mind as we set forth to challenge our future. They come from the Forward's Almanac by Benjamin Franklin. Here, Franklin states 13 virtues which can apply to everyone here tonight. They go as follows, and I quote. Number 1, temperance. Eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. 2, silence. Speak not, but what may benefit others or yourself. Avoid trifling conversation. Number 3, order. Let all your things have their places. Let each part of your business have its time. Number 4, resolution. Resolve to perform what you ought. Perform without fail with resolve. Number 5, reality. Make no expense to do good to others or yourself, i.e., waste nothing. Industry. Number 6, industry. Lose no time. Be always employed to something useful. Cut off all unnecessary actions. Number 7, sincerity. Use no longer deceit. Think innocently but justly. If you speak, speak accordingly. Number 8, justice. Wrong done by doing injuries or making the benefits are due. Number 9, moderation. Avoid extremes. Don't represent injuries so much as you think they deserve. Number 10, cleanliness. Tolerate no uncleanliness in body, clothes, and meditation. Number 11, tranquility. Be not disturbed with trifles of accidents, common or unavoidable. Number 12, chastity. Rarely use veteran for help or offspring. Never to dullness or weakness, for the injury of all or others' peace or reputation. And finally, number 13, humility. Imitate Jesus' disciples. Graduating class of 1993, I ask all of us to carry these virtues with us, to help shape and mold our characters. If we keep our goals in perspective, with the help of God, we'll all be able to achieve success. Good luck, and I'll see you in 4 years when we return to our classroom. Thank you.
Please come forward. From left to right, congratulations to our graduates.
stuck up the top and they wouldn't move to get out of my way.
I never did know where he went.
I found it over there. I was over the corner charging while I was shooting.
When did you get back? I thought you ran it down last week, so it could be that.
Yes, but it didn't even charge.
Did you plug it back in? Oh. I can't see anyone. Dan, do you see my strawberry light? You did good this year anyway. You did a great job. Where's the car? Three of us. Too much. Hi, camera.
The Requiem, Opus 9 by Maurice Duraflay, as performed by the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Chorus and Orchestra under the baton of Gareth Morrell, Director of Courses for the Cleveland Orchestra. The 125 members of the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Chorus are selected to a series of competitive auditions held each fall. This season, the members represent 43 schools from 40 communities in northeastern Ohio. The Youth Chorus made its debut at a Severance Hall concert in February of 1992, singing Dvorak's Te Deum. The women of the Youth Chorus subsequently participated in the Blossom Festival performance of Puccini's Tosca in August of 1992 with the Cleveland Orchestra. The Duraflay Requiem was the opening work on this first concert of the 7th season of the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra. It was given at Severance Hall on February 7th, 1993. WCLV is presenting a concert by the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra from Severance Hall. Shortly, Cleveland Orchestra conducting assistant Matthias Dulac will come on stage to conduct the ensemble in the Symphony in D minor by César Franck. The 100 members of the youth orchestra are selected through a series of competitive auditions, and together they represent over 47 communities from 10 counties in northeast Ohio. From September through May, the youth orchestra is led in weekly rehearsals by music director Yakia Ling. Principal players from the Cleveland Orchestra serve as coaches to members of the youth orchestra and lead regular sectional rehearsals. The Youth Orchestra is governed by the Youth Orchestra Steering Committee and by the Educational Activities Committee of the Musical Arts Association. Lauren Jenneret, Assistant Director of Educational Activities, serves as Youth Orchestra Manager. The orchestra is supported by a grant from the Martha Holden Jennings Foundation. Concerts by the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra originate with WCLV, Cleveland, and Akron. I'm Robert Conrad at Severance Hall.
The time is now 9:45, and you're listening to the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra over WCLV, Cleveland, and Akron with classical music around the clock. This broadcast is made possible by Case Western Reserve University, where excellence in teaching, research, and service is the hallmark. Case Western Reserve University is Ohio's top-ranked national university in the heart of University Circle.
César Franck wrote most of his major works when he was relatively old. He was already 66 when he completed his only symphony. Indeed, most of the music for which Franck is now remembered was the product of the last 20 years of his life. The premiere of his symphony in Paris in 1889 was not especially well received. The elderly Ambroise Thomas complained of too much chromaticism. Gounod went further and wrote that the work was the confirmation of incompetence being turned into dogma. Another example of the critical seeing through the glass darkly. The Symphony in D minor by César Franck in a moment on this concert by the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra. Performing arts are thriving at Case Western Reserve University. On the campus is the Cleveland Orchestra's Severance Hall. CWRU students through the Department of Music may choose music courses as part of their liberal arts curriculum or pursue professional programs in music education, music therapy, and audio recording. Students prepare for careers in these important and stimulating fields by developing their musicianship to its highest level, while simultaneously learning the specific skills required by their chosen field. Case Western Reserve music education students enjoy the highest job placement rate of any music education program in Ohio. Unique double majors are encouraged, combining music and English, or economics, or engineering, or preparation for medical or law school. Excellence is a hallmark of music at Case Western Reserve University. If you are, or if you have a son or daughter interested in music, call Case Western Reserve University, the heart of University Circle. And here is Mathis Dulac to conduct the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra in the Symphony in D minor by César Franck. The Symphony in D minor by César Franck, as performed by the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra, conducted by Mathis Dulac. Mr. Dulac is conducting assistant with the Cleveland Orchestra. Over the 6 previous seasons, the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra has presented an ongoing series of annual concerts here at Severance Hall, side-by-side concerts with the Cleveland Orchestra at both Severance and at the Blossom Music Center. This series of local radio broadcasts on WCLV are the regular season concerts, and concerts in downtown Cleveland and in surrounding communities. Activities for the 92-93 season include the Showtime at High Noon series at the Palace Theater, and the orchestra will present a concert at Tower City as part of the WCLV Cleveland Orchestra Marathon on April 25th. The second evening concert here at Severance Hall in the 93 series will be on Sunday, May 16th. On this first concert of the 7th season of the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra, we heard the Requiem of Maurice Duruflé with the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Chorus. The conductor of that piece was the director of choruses for the Cleveland Orchestra, Gareth Morrell. The performing arts are thriving at Case Western Reserve University. The Cleveland Orchestra's Severance Hall is on the CWRU campus. Students through the Department of Music may choose music courses, private instruction, and participation in performance ensembles. Private instruction takes place at the Cleveland Institute of Music, where many members of the Cleveland Orchestra teach. Performance ensembles include bands, orchestras, choruses, jazz, and early music. Students majoring in music may choose programs in music education and music in a liberal arts curriculum. Unique double majors are encouraged, combining music with English, or economics, or engineering, or preparation for medical or law school. Excellence is a hallmark of music at Case Western Reserve University. If you are, or if you have a son or daughter interested in music, call Case Western Reserve University, the heart of University Circle. This brings us to the conclusion of this concert by the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra, given on February 7, 1993 at Severance Hall. Concerts by the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra originate with WCLV Cleveland and Akron, and our productions of the Cleveland Orchestra Broadcast Service. Bruce Gigak's audio supervisor, Bruce Agri, audio engineer. Program notes in part by Peter Lockey. I'm Robert Conrad, speaking from Severance Hall, and thanking you for being with us.
You've been listening to the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra over WCLV, brought to you by Case Western Reserve University, Ohio's top-ranked national university in the heart of University Circle.
You can hear concerts by the Cleveland Orchestra, Sundays at 4:05 on WCLV. Each Sunday afternoon, performances by the Cleveland Orchestra are made possible on WCLV by Ameritech, bringing knowledge from every corner of the globe into every home, office, and classroom. Ameritech, your link to a better life, and your link to the Cleveland Orchestra, Sundays at 4:05 on WCLV, Cleveland and Akron, with classical music around the clock at 95.5.
10:31 is now the time here at WCLV, and we have the news coming up at 11 o'clock, followed by tonight's late program. music by Alexander Glazunov to take us up to the 11 o'clock hour here on WCLV. We've heard scenes from the ballet Opus 52, and that was played by the Scottish National Orchestra, conducted by Nimi Järvi. Tonight's news coming up on WCLV in just a moment.
Wagner's Flying Dutchman Overture, the Prokofiev Third Piano Concerto.